Good afternoon. Is this on? Okay, hello. Thank you for coming today. I am Julie Joyce. I'm the curator of contemporary art at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art and the co-curator of the exhibition upstairs and in here when we're not doing an event. Valeska Soares, Any Moment Now. My other co-curator, Vanessa Davidson, is at the Phoenix Art Museum. She could not be with us today. And I just wanted to let you know that after the show appears here, it will actually travel to the Phoenix Art Museum I think it opens in late March of 2018. So where to begin with introducing Jens Hoffmann? His reputation precedes him. He is a hero of the contemporary art world, and we're very excited to have him here this afternoon to speak. So I'll just go into a little bit of his background. From 2012 to 2016, Hoffmann was deputy director of the Jewish Museum in New York, where he currently works as director of exhibitions and public programs. He also currently serves as the Suzanne Field Chief Curator at Large at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Detroit. Additionally, he is artistic director with Michelle Grabner of Front International, the Triennial of Contemporary Art, Cleveland, which opens in July 2018. And he is artistic director of the second Honolulu Biennial, which occurs in spring of 2019. At the Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit, Hoffmann has curated numerous exhibitions, including Sonic Rebellion, Music as Resistance, and that was in 2017. Another, United States of Latin America, which he co-curated with Pablo León de la Barra in 2015, and double feature Rainer Kjartansson in 2015 and 16. As director of the Wattis Institute for Contemporary Arts at the CCA in San Francisco, he organized solo exhibitions of work by Alexandre da Cunha, Mario Ibarra Jr., and Tino Segal, among many others. At the Institute of Contemporary Arts in London, which is where he served as director of exhibitions earlier in his career. He also organized solo exhibitions by a number of artists, including Sarah Thwin Evans, Martha Rossler, and John Bach, among others. Among the many exhibitions that Hoffmann has organized, he has also organized the 12th Istanbul Biennial in 2011 and the 9th Shanghai Biennial in 2012, again among many others. And Hoffmann's over 36 publications include Showtime, the 50 most influential exhibitions of contemporary art from 2014, and the best-selling Curating from A to Z from 2015, a sequel to which is forthcoming later this year. Hoffmann has edited and contributed essays to exhibition catalogs on topics that include contemporary Aboriginal Australian painting, Soviet photography, and institutional critique, as well as the work of artists Paolo Pivi, Roman Olga, Fernando Ortega, Marepe, and Per Kirkeby, to name just a few. In 2017, Hoffmann curated the exhibition 99 Cents or Less at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Detroit, which included work by Valeska Soares. At the Jewish Museum from 2013 to 2016, Hoffmann co-curated with Kelly Taxter the series, Using Walls, Flooring, Floors, and Ceilings, in which artists were commissioned to produce installations in the museum's entrance lobby. In 2015, Valeska Soares was invited to participate in the series, for which she produced her work titled Time Has No Shadows. Most recently, Hoffmann collaborated with Valeska Soares to produce a monographic publication published in the spring of 2017. This, of course, precedes the publication that both SBMA and PAM, the Phoenix Art Museum, are about to release, titled Valeska Soares, Any Moment Now, a comprehensive catalog to accompany the exhibition that's currently on view here at SBMA. And Jens, of course, made a contribution to that publication. So we are very pleased to have him here. It's very apt that he's here, as he's worked with the artist several times and has known her for many, many years. Without further ado, may I introduce to you Jens Hoffmann.
Thank you, Julie, for the kind introduction, and thanks to all of you for coming. I was outside walking around in Santa Barbara enjoying the weather, and now I feel like I have a heat stroke. So I really hope that all of what I'm going to say makes actually some sense. I'm actually extremely excited to be here today and to talk about Valeska's work. As Julie mentioned, I've known her for many, many years. I met her the first time when I was living in Brazil and working with a lot of contemporary artists of her generation, including Fernanda Gomez, Rivani Neunschmander, and others. And Valeska, however, was one of this group of artists that moved to New York, so our relationship continued there. And I was also able to go down to Los Angeles to see some of the other shows of PSD, and was also lucky enough to see the show at the MCA here. A lot of wonderful work from Guatemala, and I'm originally from Costa Rica, so for me this is very satisfying to see so much Latin America here on the West Coast. Okay, so I'm going to, well, one of the things that I noticed when I was walking through the show was that a lot of the works that are in the show were actually also part of my lecture, and I wasn't sure whether or not that might be redundant or if it's actually going to help all of you to gain a little more insight into her work and the particular pieces. So I guess I decide to, for the second, hopefully giving you a little bit more insight, not only about the pieces, but also about her ideas and, well, perhaps more my ideas. She really doesn't like to be interpreted, or as you can see, there's no wall labels or anything, so she's very much against that and very much for a direct experience of the artwork. Okay, so here we go. In his 1972 work, Invisible Cities, the Italian writer Italo Calvino, someone who Valeska sees as a great inspiration, coined an enigmatic expression: desires are already memories. Despite its assured tone, the sentence contains an obvious contradiction. A yearning for something that hasn't happened yet can't possibly be the same as an untrustworthy picture of what already occurred. The phrase suits its subject in that it refuses to submit to sense. Both memories and desires hold a similar kind of paradox within them. They feel true at the core, but pieces of them are always just out of reach. Valeska Soares' works exist right in the middle of this, very comfortably in an uneasy space. It asserts itself between memory and text, the instinctual and otherworldly, the hope for a revelatory experience, and the words one might use to summarize it after the fact. Soares harnesses the power of text to be both deliberate and slippery, employing the capacity of language to convey multiple messages at once. The title of her mixed media work, Any Moment Now, which you also see upstairs, for instance, can be deployed as an earnest statement of rapid anticipation or as an acribic signal of impatience. The unstable meanings suggested by the name of the work are only the beginning, any moment now. The piece is an infinitely rearrangeable poem composed of found material. In this case, vintage book covers that are framed and mounted on the wall. The publications are related through proximity and subject matter. Early dark, tender as a night, I will cry tomorrow. Some are wistful, drink to yesterday, and others are unflinching. The party is over. Together, they reveal a general obsession. If time is a titular subject of so many fictions and dramas and non-fiction, The Age of Reason, 1,000 Years and a Day, Their Finest Hours, it must be a shared source of fixation and anxiety, a primary means by which we organize experience. Soares does not shy away from subject as vast as this, instead plumbing the depths of such topics as time, togetherness, solitude, desire, and pleasure. Though her mediums vary from steel to ceramics and from paper to wax, her explorations are consistent in their unflinching capacity to dig until they reach the core, where physical substance and symbolic significance are one and the same. Since you've seen this upstairs already, I'm going to go through this quickly. Meanings are built into materials in the same volatile way they are embedded in words. Despite the fact that some seem intrinsic, they rely on context. This is why materials mean radically different things inside and outside the white cube, and why words lose their sense when repeated over and over again, back to back, without other words around them. They dissolve into sounds. Another work that you've probably seen upstairs relates right to what I just said, Catalogo, made in 2008. Soares explores the materiality of text in a very literal fashion. She turned recycled book pages into pulp and recasted the pulp, the substance of the recycled book, into 44,600 individual letters that are piled together. Here's a close-up. With their printed type as sponge, the various meanings these words once presented in the books are reduced to the 26 basic shapes of the alphabet. The volume of the material is the same as it was before it was gutted. But unlike a heap of books, which might signify the vast amount of knowledge humankind has accumulated, it contains the vast amount of knowledge it contains, this jumbled mountain is full of potential energy, a mass of positive and negative space waiting to be arranged into something new. By creating a new work through the destruction of others, Soares suggests that the meaning that were there were no more comprehensible and perhaps no more significant than as yet unwritten ones. Soares is unafraid of ephemerality. Much of her work is rooted in the conviction that transformation demands destruction, and that translation always involves loss. Both materials and words are hopelessly imprecise when it comes to conveying indistinct sensations in hindsight. Memories are by nature foggier than experiences themselves. They decay like so much organic matter. Though it is impossible to recall and communicate every perceptual impression, trying remains a primary exercise of the human experience. It's a means of making sense of both daily and profound occurrences, of finding out whether someone else saw what you saw, despite the risk of misinterpretation. This error-prone activity is worth the effort. To know all the meanings of another person's upfront would be wholly uninteresting. With the understanding that desire hinges on a degree of mystery, Soares experiments with the allure of the understated. In love stories, which you also see upstairs, classic writings on love are stripped of all their content apart from the titles, headers, and page numbers. The blank books are arranged on a shelf where visitors can thumb through them. The reproductions allude to the canonical quality of the original, even deprived of its body. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Del Amor y Otros Dominios, could steer an association. They also point to the way subjective memory, whether of a plot point or a person, tends to stand in for the real thing. Faced with the unknowability of other people, Soares suggests we paste ourselves into the blank pages of the logbooks. Here's this close-up. And the version that you see upstairs is in fact an expanded version of the one that you have here on the slide. 4.2 similarly investigates gaps in understanding, this time probing the intimate relationship between others. Dedicatory pages torn from books are arrayed on the wall, edge to edge. Together they form an asymmetrical bracket that swoops down from the ceiling, ending at a single sheet inches from the floor. These dedications on these pages are obscured in more than one sense. The authors are often unnamed, and in thanking their loved ones, making a dedication, they refer to circumstances readers cannot possibly understand. The objects of their gratitude and commitment are even more enigmatic, identified by their first names, nicknames, or pet names. The inaccessibility of additional information provokes a vain desire to crack the mystery. In another work, here's a close-up of that dedication piece. In another work, Edit Love Stories, Soares uses excerpts from critical theories unlike likely source material. She modifies single pages from Susan Rubin Solamina's Subversive Intent, Gender, Politics in the Avant-Garde, or Roland Barthes' A Lover's Discourse, blocking the more academic language with sharp edged block boxes that you see here, as if arranging them on behalf of a government agency, or perhaps even censoring them. The glossy C-prints are all the more engaging because the abstractions are built into the image and it is impossible to take them back. Many of Soares' most poignant works reveal the imaginative potential of what is not there. Leftovers and ancillary objects convey a sense of the absent thing more brilliantly than a picture of it could ever do. In Sugar Blues, used candy wrappers are arranged into minimal compositions. They're carefully placed pieces of tiny, vibrant, metallic trash, some bearing gooey marks where the chocolate once was, are encased in a shadow box. Each is a small city that can be inhabited. The arrangements are inviting despite the fact that the party is visibly over. In Untitled, From Vanishing Point, a work from 1998, wax and ceramic replicas stand in for a collection of more than 100 clay and terracotta flower pots that Soares collected, but which she could not bring when she moved from her old apartment into her new house in Brooklyn. In describing her motivations, Valeska said, "I wanted to see those things exist in another form because I couldn't have them in the original form anymore. I wanted to carry them with me. That's the way I deal with psychological things, sometimes. I preserve them like mortuary masks." The substitutes are doubles, monuments to the unmonumental original things, which Soares subsequently destroyed. The source for the castings were of negligible objective value and were insignificant only to the artist, significant only to the artist. But the effort involved in duplicating each one causes the copies to resonate. Soares does not conserve the thing itself as a precious object, but rather protects a memory of it. In the sense that copies will never perfectly capture the original, this piece could be read as an exercise in futility. It can also be seen as an allegory for the creative process, typically marked by failure, repetition, and dizzied feelings of forestallment. Soares manifests representations of circularity in symbolic and visceral ways. Which brings us to spiraling. 8 antique spiral staircases, that you also see in the exhibition, that are gathered in the center of a room, each only 4 or 5 steps tall. They're coupled. One twists up to the left and the next one down to the right. Angling upward only to stop, they form an island of disillusioned aspiration. The work conveys inevitability. What goes up must come down. But through the steps lead frustratingly nowhere. The tone is still playful. Rather than a mournful musing on fate, the physicality of the loops of the staircases makes them feel almost comic, like a slapstick pratfall repeated for laughs. In defiance of the weighty subject matter she tackles, understated humor winds its way into many of Soares' works, an unexpected reward for engaging with her work. Born in 1957 in Brazil, Soares, as many artists of her generation, was influenced by neo-concretism. And like them, she takes an interest in the way environments affect behavior. For Push-Pull, a performance that took place at the Cisneros Foundation in Miami in 2013 during the Miami Art Fair, giant hunks of pastel-colored eatable candy hang from stainless steel armatures. The candy's sticky texture gives into gravity but also resists. And the visitors are invited to step up, put on plastic gloves, and play with them. Their work could be a meditation on impermanence, on the power of human invention to effect change, on inorganic matter, or on the oft-repeated aphorism that everyone is an artist. But more to the point, it's about the simultaneous seriousness and silliness of it all. The corporal feeling of holding up a giant chunk of taffy in a public plaza. Soares Vagalume, installed here at 11 Rivington in New York's Lower East Side in 2010, which you also see upstairs, also invites visitors to toy with it. Long chains dangle from hundreds of bare light bulbs, and visitors can pull the cords to turn individual lights on and off. Aesthetically, the piece might be reminiscent of Jeff Wall's iconic After Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, the Prologue 2000, which you see here. A lightbox photograph which depicts Ellison's protagonist hunched under a ceiling saturated with hundreds of light bulbs. And it also perhaps recalls Felix Gonzalez Torres' Untitled Golden from 1995, a gilded plastic beaded curtain that visitors are invited to pass through. Beyond exploring themes of temporality, embodiment, and visibility, both Push-Pull and Vagalume are deeply rooted in context. Push-Pull, at an art fair known for its superficial commerciality, Soares offers up the sweet, stickiest candy and invites people to mess with it. In New York's Lighting District in the Lower East Side, where every other storefront is chock full of lamps, or at least used to be, she presents the one thing that is not in short supply, but offers a quality of interaction that is otherwise inaccessible in the lamp shops. Her experimental scenarios commit equally to cerebral and sensuous experiences. Even her most theoretical investigations are also physical invitations. In Untitled Vanishing Point, a work from 1998, steel vessels are filled with perfume, suffusing the gallery with a sweet and heavy odor. These forms are minimal. The shapes have been pared back to sharp edges articulated in cold metal. As visitors walk through the room, it's not the visual, but the aromatic quality of the work in the air that becomes immersive and also intrusive. Too much of something sweet, like the perfume, might become overpowering, and in some cases even unbearable. Soares notes, I'm really interested in that faint line between being seduced by something and being completely intoxicated by it. This work is an exercise in crossing that barrier from flirtatious exhilaration to woozy drunkenness. By contrast, two sculptures, Untitled From After, Pillow, and Untitled From After, Mattress, which I think are also both in the exhibition, these works gave shape to the critical tension between not enough and perhaps too much. These sculptures of two pillows and a mattress bear the evidence of bodies. Indentation marks are found where two heads might have rested, but these signals of warmth are suspicious. The icons of softness and comfort that are usually associated with pillows are cast in cold marble, a medium prized for its hardness and solidity. By pitching content against material, Soares conveys invitation and prohibition simultaneously. Much of Soares' work springs from her interest in language. Trained as an architect, she often responds to the unique constraints and opportunities presented by a space. But in her approach, she relinquishes the obsessive control normally associated with building projects. Instead, she constructs her installations as through stringing together works. For her exhibition, Unfold at the Wadsworth Athenaeum in 2017, Soares selected 31 antique tables from the museum's collection and covered each with custom-cut felt in gray, red, black, or white. She arranged the tables end-to-end in a rectangle around a fixed focal point. A 17th century Mannerist fountain permanently installed in the museum's courtyard, depicting Venus with a nymph and a satyr. Soares titled the work Tabled, which not only refers to the collection of objects that you choose, the tables from the collection, but of course also refers to the action. To table something is to set it aside for later, to postpone consideration. Here the ring of tables creates a barricade that blocks viewers from getting close to the fountain and Venus. In a deadpan sense, Soares has tabled the sculpture by surrounding it with tables, temporarily curtailing access to the Venus. However, the sculpture can also be viewed from above. And from this vantage point, Soares' intervention does the opposite. The bold colors of the felt-top tables draw a new kind of attention to the fountain, as if altering the punctuation in a sentence. Her gesture changes how the fountain and the tables read, and allows for multiple interpretations to exist at once. The type of double meaning the artist employs in table is present in many of her works. Her projects have their own internal logic, but stay clear of a single narrative. In every case, her playfulness with words and forms adds up to more than a light-hearted pun. It is an assertion about how meaning is made and an invitation to create meaning. Soares' facility with using materials is expensive, yet open-ended. It is a quality that is less about conveying a message than interrogating process of reading and translation. This poetic sensibility is perhaps rooted in the art historical tradition of Brazil, where Soares has built upon the visual and conceptual development of artists such as Lydia Pape or Lydia Clark, who were all part of the neo-concrete movement, which I already mentioned. Not by chance, the Neo-Concrete Manifesto, written in 1959, was written by a poet, Ferreira Guiar. In it, he advocated for forms that allowed the expressive potential of an artist's work to come forward. Resisting the dogmatic constraint of a previous movement, concretism, he described art as, quote, something which amounts to more than the sum of its constituted elements, something which analyzes may break down in various elements, but which can only be understood phenomenologically. The manifesto asserts a conviction, since popularized, that art's meaning is not intrinsic, but is also activated very much in relationship to the viewer. It also suggests that there is necessarily something ineffable about a viewing experience that language fails us when we try to dissect an encounter that is also very much about sensation. Soares expands about these concerns, often using the tools of language to create experiences that exceed these. Many of Soares' projects directly reference texts. Here, Puzzled, Threshold, and Bindings, all larger series, make use of antique book covers arranged by color and mounted on wooden panels. But even works without explicit literary reference retain a poetic quality, imparted by Soares' process. In the artist's works, there is a correlation to language in the way I work. I don't have a lot of storylines, but some of the objects that I create, I see as words that can be repeated in many different forms, or that can be articulated in just one phrase. Just as a character and the effectiveness of a written work is connected to word choice, the artist's installation draws their power in part from the materials that she is selecting. Often, as we've seen, these are everyday objects that carry their own distinct associations. But stripped of their purpose, these useful things resonate on a phenomenologically higher level. Her recent installation, Unhinged, from 2017, is composed of bad headboards, which you also see upstairs. And they all hold a set of loaded meanings, such as sleep, of course, domesticity, and perhaps sexuality. Joined end-to-end in interlocking chains, they are installed in the center of a room. The objects are oddly exposed when pulled away from their normal position, which is usually against the wall. Pulled together with hinges to form several zigzag lines, they seem unstable and precarious, as the work's title, Unhinged, suggests. But they are also stronger than they would be on their own. Standing at the center of the room on two legs, they have almost an anthropomorphic quality. The work explores how objects hold onto their own meanings, but also experiments with how meaning shifts with context. To conclude, true to life, togetherness in Soares' works is full of the gaps that make laugh and conversation interesting, the same ones that also render it always complicated. Her works on being together also works on solitude. Conversation piece is composed of two glass chairs that share an arm but face opposite directions. There are no seats where the cushions are meant to go. One can imagine the interaction that might happen if two people sit here, but actually doing so would break the sculpture and cause both participants to collapse in shattered glass. The fragility of these chairs points to the unsteadiness of any social bond and relationship, even those hopefully conceived. Rather than issuing a cheerful invitation to participate, the work's address is closer to bait and switch. It looks like other works that strive from conviviality, but in fact convey the imperfect nature of any connection, even the ones that seem shiny on the surface, as these glass chairs. But imperfection, Soares says, should not be mourned. On the contrary, the incomplete nature of most interaction causes even potential bonds to reverberate with possibility. In finale, the final work I'm going to speak about, which you also see upstairs, an antique table is topped with a mirror and cluttered with gold-rimmed goblets, edged glasses, and ornately painted pictures. Each is filled with alcohol for gallery goers to drink at will. I was told that you're not supposed to drink it here, according to the loan agreement. The glasses are occasionally replenished, but otherwise left untouched, free from intervention apart from the occasional sip by the audience. When it goes another time. The work's title suggests celebration, finale, but the nature of the party is a mystery. As in so many of her works, Soares sets all the pieces in place, creating narrative opportunities and taking care not to foreclose them. She happily deprives us of the ending, suggesting only that the same uncertainty that keeps people apart can bring them together. Just as there is no way for visitors to know what the joyful event was that took place here, there's no way for them to know their absent drinking companions. The incomplete scenario is a challenge. To invent memories in place of voids or to hang out in the blank spaces, acknowledging that there is more to be gained by leaving things unsettled and unsaid. Thank you very much. You suggested that we do a Q&A situation?
Yeah.
Absolutely okay with me. Yes,
Well, so that
there's
is,
some music playing,
oh.
but it's not part of the lecture.
That is a problem that I know Valeska said that most of her works are for interaction, but yet we can't interact with them here. I wonder, have there been other exhibits where people could interact with them?
Well, in this exhibition there's actually two works that you can interact with. There's the bed in the front, and
The fainting?
yeah, the painting bed, and there is the light piece that you
Oh,
can
yeah,
work
right.
with. The two pieces that are interactive or are supposed to be activated by the audience, finale, which is the table with the glasses, and the love books, unfortunately, could not be included in that set of works that can be activated. But in other exhibitions, they have been activated. I actually showed the love books in an exhibition that are organized in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and
they did.
we were able to interact with them.
Do you know in that set of love books, was one of them turned upside down?
Not that I know that they are turned upside down.
A friend of mine who was a librarian touched one and turned it over right, and the guard got really upset. And so,
Yeah. I don't know how many books there are now, but it's a continuous process, and they are all displayed by the year in which they were published. Any other questions? The gentleman in the back.
So in the series of work Love Stories, it's my understanding since we can't interact with them, are they filled with blank pages? Blank empty pages?
The idea is very much that you project your own love story into them, perhaps with the knowledge of the book in mind. But yes, they are empty in terms of the pages. The text has been removed, but the page numbers are still there, and the headings are still there, the title is still there, and the name of the author is still present.
Thank you.
Please, yes.
Following with this earlier question, when I was walking through and realizing that some of the works that were meant to be interactive were not, it reminded me of a Franz West exhibition I had seen in Vienna at Mumachen. I had seen many of those works earlier, and at that point, one could sit in a chair or interact with certain elements. And walking through the museum, almost every work had a sign saying, "Do not touch, do not sit." And I wonder if you have any larger theories about what happens when the art that is designed and mobilized to be interactive is collected and rendered museological, and these possibilities then are neutered. Because that's kind of what we're looking for towards in our future.
Well, not only in the future, I think even in the past. I mean, that type of work has been going on for a long time, and in case of Valeska's work, obviously, she was very influenced also by Lydia Clark, who in the later part of her life, in fact, used the artworks for therapy, and they were very much to be touched. The beach shoes, for example, the sculptures that could be modulated. In terms of the museum and the works and the don't touch signs, I mean, it's kind of like a lecture in itself to answer that question, because on the one hand, I think that many museums are very tied to the idea of the preciousness of an artwork, of a masterpiece, which you obviously don't want to touch because of conservation reasons. The other thing that I noticed is once you allow the audience to touch one thing, they start touching everything else as well. So I think it is up for us as curators, museum educators, to continue to enlighten the visitor about the diversity of possible artistic practices and artistic articulations, in which some cases you can't, in some cases you can touch. But it's hard to know. And the most outrageous case that I've ever seen, and you mentioned just Franz West's show, was an exhibition about Felix González Torres in Hamburg at the Kunsthalle, where you were not allowed to get the candy, the posters, or the postcards. So the entire show did not make sense. And I was upstairs before and talking to one of the tour guides, and she was looking at the love stories, and she was saying, "Please do not touch." And I was thinking, well, if you really don't touch them, and you don't take them out, and you don't thumb through the empty pages, the work is not complete. You're not going to actually have the experience of the work, and it's almost meaningless to present this work. And I understand, of course, that the collector is worried about this, but at the same time, you buy this piece because it has this potential. This potential is just as much part of the work as the material in the marble pillows. You can't say, well, I want a soft pillow. This is probably my quick answer to your question.
And as you mentioned Felix González Torres, if you remove the wasting away of all of these works, that is a huge component of the structure of the work.
I mean, it's pretty much what it's all about. Yes, any other questions? Yes, please.
And just in the same vein, that the marble pillows up there, you weren't supposed to touch them. You would not know they were marble, really, or unless you did touch them.
Well, if you, I think, carefully look at them, you will figure that out, that they're actually marble. And I think that on the label they also mentioned that they are marble. It's kind of interesting,
It's part of the piece, obviously.
which is sort of like, yeah, of course, again, this push-pull, you want to you put your head down, and it sort of promises something that is cozy and snuggly and warm, perhaps. Someone might have just been there because, you see the dent, and then you realize, wow, this is a cold piece of marble. And we just mentioned Felix González Torres, and of course, also, there's a reference. And I'm not 100% sure whether Valeska is doing this consciously, these references. But of course, there's a piece that you might have seen. It's a billboard piece of an unmade bed where Felix and his lover just spent the night, and you can see the heads, the dents in the pillows. It's called Untitled, but it doesn't have anything in parentheses, as many of his works usually do, and it's from 1999. It was a billboard piece that I think was exhibited in New York during his retrospective at the Guggenheim Museum in 1991. Yes, please.
I'm interested in what you said about translation and loss. And I wonder if she's Brazilian living in New York. So I wonder if over her career, if you've seen that become more prominent since she's been in New York, if that was a period or if that's something she's gotten more interested in. And also compared with people of her generation, thinking of the artists who stayed in Brazil versus ones who left. Do you think that becomes more of a preoccupation for artists who, are living in it?
It could be that is a preoccupation, even though I think Valeska has already lived for 2 decades in New York, or at least 15 years. So I'm not 100% sure that this is necessarily what she's referring to. I just think that perhaps it is the idea of how art in many ways can be not necessarily accessible immediately, and that perhaps in looking at the piece, something is lost in the way that we experience it. So it's like this common term where something is lost in translation, which is not so much about language, but perhaps how does meaning translate from the piece to the viewer. When I entered the museum today, on the big wall where you see all the book covers about time, and there was a family standing in front of it, and they were talking to each other and saying, "What is this all about? What is this? I don't understand this. What's she doing there?" And I said, "Well, why don't you really look very carefully?" And they looked and looked, and then they said, "Oh, this is all about day and night and time, isn't it?" And I said, "Well, you see, when you look very carefully and make an effort, then you actually realize what this work is about, or at least you find something within the work that you can." And they really had this moment of like, "Oh, okay, yeah, now I get it. Let's go and see something else." And it was almost sort of like, let's go on an adventure, see if we can find out what something else might mean. But I think for Valeska, it's also that even if you don't look at the text, the visual composition, the relationships of forms on the various book covers are just as important for her. So there's always these different layers of what is important to her and what she wants to communicate. Any more questions from our? Yeah, you.
I know that I read, or she said that all throughout her, from the beginning to the end, it's about ideas. Her work is about ideas, and that it creates an intelligence. Could you speak to that idea of intelligence? What is she talking about? Is it the way she ideates throughout the process of art, and then it becomes its own intelligence?
Well, I think often when we think about intelligence, we think about some form of like intellectual, rational type of intelligence. But I suppose there's probably many different other ways of thinking about intelligence, like perhaps an aesthetic intelligence, or and I can see how she might talk about that. But as I said before, she's very particular about not inserting any specific meaning to any of the pieces. They're all completely open, and yet you can find something to connect with that speaks to you. I guess we all bring our different experiences and our levels of knowledge about art and the world to these works, and they speak to us in many, many different ways. And I suppose when you look at the piece with the light bulbs, again, it could have so many different meanings in terms of turning the lights on and off. And, why are we blinded by the light? And simultaneously we are afraid of the darkness. You have a very urgent question.
Me?
Yes. I didn't want to put you on the spot.
No, I'm good. I don't.
Well, go.
Thank you so much,
No,
Jens,
thank you,
for
thank you.
coming. All right.